Today's seminar, how to maintain your credit score to help you buy more real estate. We've been talking about credit for quite some time, ever since the interest rates have started to rise. The maintaining your credit score at a high number helps you qualify. So as rates go up, you want a high score to give yourself every advantage when you walk into that bank or when you talk to your mortgage broker, so you can qualify.
Yeah, I mean, everybody's expenses are going up. We're reading the reports. People are spending more money on their credit cards. I mean, these are going to be great questions for Richard to understand. How does that affect if you are running a balance on your credit cards? If you do have lines of credit, what does that look like?
Yeah.
You know, and then how does it affect your score? At the end of the day, you know what? We need credit to buy, so you don't want to do anything that is going to ruin that.
Yeah, and we're going to just go over this slide briefly before we get Richard on. Good credit, bad credit, or no credit. One thing that our real estate investors learn over time is that no matter what your credit situation is, you're going to either run out of qualifying ability or you're going to run out of cash. So you need to use somebody else's credit. Azad and I have had to use JV partners over the years. Other people's money is one of the great ways to increase your holdings without taking up more of your qualifying ability, without taking hits on your credit. So if you don't have good credit, of course, you have to work with somebody like Richard to bring your credit score back up, but it's never the end of the world. You can still invest. And we've shown time after time that our clients can do it.
Yeah, there's many ways to do it. I mean, if there's a will, there's a way. We'll get you there. We've seen wonderful things, but at the same time, Tim, you're right. You have to work with someone that understands how to repair credit and how to get it in good standing so that you can qualify on your own. But sometimes it's not possible. I know people new to Canada. I was new to Canada once, and had to go down the JV route as well. So if anyone wants to reach out about that, we're definitely around to talk about that as well.
Okay, so we will bring in Richard Moxley. He's the best-selling author of 2 books, The 9 Rules of Credit and The Credit Game. If you haven't read either of these books, you can pick them up on Amazon. We know that for sure, right, Richard? And one thing that we want to stress is working with Richard over the years is he's also a licensed mortgage broker, so he knows the game. He knows the real estate investment game. He worked with our team years and years and years ago.
Yeah.
We're all getting a little older now.
We actually bought Richard one of his first properties for him. So we've known him for many, many years.
Yeah.
And it's just so good to get him back in. We had him in, Tim, you were saying, before COVID, I think it was.
Yeah. And
we think it's such an important topic that we had to get him back. So thanks for joining us, Richard.
I titled it Creducation because Azad and Chandler picked a really long topic title, and I didn't want to put it all on the slide. So I just put Creducation, which is essentially what I do, helping Canadians better understand the credit system. And as everyone has kind of mentioned, my history is mortgage financing, but now full-time it's helping Canadians better understand credit. And my wife always asks me what I do, so I had to break it down because it's very niche and it's not like a doctor or a mechanic where you kind of know. There's not many of us that just focus on credit. Most of it is attached to some kind of debt program, or some mortgage brokers will kind of do it as well. But as far as resources for you, for your tenants, for anyone that is looking to improve credit, that's essentially what I provide, is resources. So podcast, YouTube, book as mentioned, talk a lot about debt and how that affects credit, and then one-on-one in-depth reviews and disputes. So if you have any questions on that, that's my email. That's the best way to get a hold of me. So if you have any questions about the presentation, then you can definitely reach out. But during the presentation, I really enjoy questions. So I actually can't see the chat thing the way the presentation's there. So
are we allowed to do questions like live now?
Yeah, you can do questions. And Richard, if you can't see them, can you check on your dashboard there?
It's because I got a Mac and it kind of
Oh,
takes over the screen. So
okay.
I can't see that. So if you're okay with it, guys, if they can unmute, that would make it a lot easier for me.
Okay, yeah, everyone out there, you can unmute to ask him the question.
Sure.
Yeah, I do have a question.
Sure, perfect.
I'm not sure if it's for you or anybody else there. So we have heard about that that the builder get help from government to build for low rental building for rentals. And I was wondering, is this for something if you purchase a property that it's already built and it's for rental property?
If you're building if you're building a rental building, then you will get government grants to do that.
Yeah,
Not
so
if you buy something that it's existed before.
no, it's a program to stimulate more construction of strictly rental buildings. The federal government is trying to do what it can to add to the rental inventory in the country. So it's going to be a grant program for builders.
Okay, and so do you know in what phase they provide that loan with a low interest?
Well, you have to apply for it. So basically you could talk to Danielle about it, or if you have your own mortgage broker, but you actually have to qualify for that product and then have the ability to go ahead and build that.
Yeah.
So it would be in the application stage.
Yeah, and this program is so new. I'm sure the rules around it are going to be rolled out in the next couple of months. So just stay tuned for announcements from the federal government on who qualifies for this and how much money you can get out of it.
Yeah,
So there is not
just to touch
still
base
rule.
on that, it's not fully rolled out yet. It is specific to purpose-built rentals, and it is multi-family. So you're not talking about building a duplex and renting out
Yeah.
both sides. It is a purpose-built rental. It's to encourage, like Tim and Azad said, the construction of rentals for housing of middle-income Canadians. And there's actually requirements in there. It has to be affordable rentals. So it's not like for somebody that wants to be a landlord and charge the highest rent per unit. Like there are specific requirements to the grant and the program, but it's not fully rolled out yet. So yeah, it's a little bit preliminary right now, but if you do want to chat more, like you can always reach out outside of this presentation.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I'll try to reach out.
Okay,
Perfect.
you can carry on, Richard.
Awesome. So the first thing that I always cover is some assumptions that are out there. We all know where assumptions get us. And when it comes to credit, there are definitely some assumptions that get a lot of consumers into problems. And one of the biggest ones out there is chasing a high score. I know that we've talked about the importance of a high score, and I'm not saying that it's not important, but where most people get into trouble is they start chasing it and focusing on the score so much that they lose sight of really the purpose of the score and also knowing how the score is generated. So if you're just sitting back and watching your score bounce around, that's something that can drive you a little nutty. And I talk to a lot of people who the first thing out of their mouth is my score. And yes, the score, we want to get it higher, and over 700 is kind of the ideal. But the challenge with saying that is that the score that you have access to is not the score that the banks use. So I'll repeat that because it kind of boggles people's minds. The score that you have access to, whether you pay for it or get it for free on a third-party app, that is not what the banks are using. So to explain this, Sarah's story, when she looked online, she saw 529. However, when she applied, finally got around to applying because the fear, what Danielle was talking about as far as the don't stress out so much about the score, or don't keep it from having you to actually talk to a broker. This was exactly what was happening with Sarah. She was so freaked out because she saw low score, and the ranking systems all put her as poor credit. that kept her away from even applying or attempting. So this was her credit report. And as you can see here, there's multiple scores. So the one that she was seeing, the 529, however, the broker or the bank or lender would be seeing the FICO score, which is 149 points higher. So when you are looking or obsessing about the score, you have to be very careful about that because, like I said, the score you see is not what the banks use. And so this just goes back to, once again, what Danielle was saying. If you are interested in mortgage financing or needing, I mean, who's interested in mortgage financing? If you're looking to buy a property and you know that you're going to be needing your credit, then talk to a broker, a bank specialist, mortgage broker, Danielle. Talk to them as quickly as possible in the stage. I know everyone gets freaked out about these hits to the score. They're only a few points, and it is not that dramatic. You have a total of, the score goes between 300 and 900. So you essentially have a total of 600 points. An inquiry is the lowest effect to the score possible when looking at your credit report. Not that big of a deal. It is way more important to find out if there's errors or something on there. Or in Sarah's case and possibly your case, you have something in the past that you think is holding back your credit, but has now fallen off your report. And now it's much higher than what you're expecting, which gives you the confidence to shop for best rates and best terms. So
Hey,
Equifax, yep.
Quickly, Richard, there's a question in the chat.
Sure.
Julian's asking, how much can an excellent credit score affect the interest rate compared to a bad one?
So if it's really bad, then I mean it could be thousands of dollars. And what I mean by that is you're either in the threshold or you're declined for a financing. So if you're not, I mean, technically 620, you can talk about, most lenders on the A side are looking for 650. But if you don't get there, then if you're not approved for A, then you got to go to the next category, which is kind of the B or alternative lending, if you want to be more specific. And that generally includes fees. So a percentage of your purchase price. So that could be 1%, 2% plus a higher interest rate. Could be 1, 2, 3. You can talk to Danielle about that because I don't keep up to date with rates anymore. One of the blessings of not having to deal with mortgage is anymore. So but on having said that, if your credit's really bad, well, then you're pushed down to private financing, which then escalates and jumps up the interest rate and the fees dramatically. So having a good score is important to pass that qualification threshold, get approved for best rates and best terms, and obviously get the best rates and best terms for any kind of mortgage financing. So hopefully that answered your question. On the screen is just the note that Equifax put on their website now stating that there's multiple credit scores on there. But one thing that is also very important is that most brokers and banks will only look at one credit report when you go for qualifying. And this becomes very problematic if you are not looking at both your Equifax and TransUnion report. So there's free credit reports and apps for both Equifax and TransUnion that are available. There's lots of free options. And yes, checking it with a broker is important at the beginning of kind of the process, but you also need to be looking at both reports to understand if there's any public records, as Danielle had mentioned, anything that's not supposed to be on there that should. There's 2 credit reporting agencies in Canada. There's a third in the US, but we don't have to worry about that. And they're different. And what I mean by that is the score can be different. It's actually more common to have a different score between the two than them being the exact same. The other thing that's different, not all public records will report to both Equifax and TransUnion. For example, if you owe maintenance enforcement, that shows up as a public record, or can if you have an outstanding bill. And that does not show up on TransUnion, but it shows up on Equifax. So if you're monitoring your app with Credit Karma or any of the banks on their free version, or most of the free apps out there will use TransUnion, they don't see that maintenance enforcement. But then when you go and apply, that shows up on Equifax. That can stop your deal before it's even begun. So you could have great credit in every other way. You could have income, down payment, and everything else, but you have that maintenance enforcement writ show up, or that judgment kind of thing showing up on there, then all of a sudden that kills the deal. But then on the flip side, there are some collection agencies that only report on TransUnion. So if you're checking your Equifax report and not the TransUnion, then of course you're only seeing half of your credit profile. So it's really important to be checking both Equifax and TransUnion. The score, yes, will be a little bit different. That's not too concerning. But what's really important is to make sure that everything that is supposed to be reporting is showing up, and then things that aren't supposed to be reporting are removed or corrected long before the mortgage application process. As Tim and Azad had made very clear, and it's no surprise to anyone on the call, when you submit an application or offer to purchase, you don't really have time to put like a month for financing conditions. Otherwise, the seller will just go somewhere else. So you have to make sure that your credit is correct and good early on in the process, and a mortgage broker can help you find those as well. So one of the things that we talk about as far as the score is just the output or the end result. So if you have a lower score or trying to figure out how to improve or keep the credit score high, you really got to focus on what you're inputting or what's going on that actually controls the score. And that's where, I mean, you can call it credit tools or credit accounts, but these are the things that show up on your credit report and can help improve your score. So taxes, utilities, those kind of things, they don't actually show up or build your credit if you owe and you haven't paid them, as Danielle had been mentioning. Then of course that shows up as a public record and will dramatically lower the score. Rent is now starting to show up, or there's a way to get it on the report. Borwell is one of the big companies, but there's a lot of different companies that will allow rent to show up. It does show up on there, or can, but it's not the best type of credit when looking to rebuild. And Danielle, you can comment on this if you've had any experience. But from what I've heard from underwriters and most mortgage brokers is that although you would assume that rent showing up on the credit report would be something that the underwriters would really be impressed by, unfortunately, because it's self-reported, so far my experience is underwriters aren't very impressed with it. It kind of just looks like an additional like cell phone type. That's how it reports, the same as a cell phone. So yes, it's something that you could throw on there, or your tenants could, or whatever, but it's not that, I guess, important. Of course, unless you miss payments, like Danielle had mentioned, then all bad is bad, not all good is worth your time. So what dramatically affects the score, or if you're seeing your score bounce around or fluctuate a lot of that has to do with the utilization or the balance versus the limit on your credit card. So I'll go through this example and show you how dramatic it can be. And this is actually the broker version of the report, so I won't go into the individual details of it, but I'll tell you the before and after. So there was a month difference. And what had happened here is someone got a pre-approval and they were at 747, which is good enough to qualify for best rates and best terms. And hopefully that hasn't changed, Danielle. Pretty sure it hasn't. And then what happened in a month is that it dropped a lot. So it over triple digit drop just within a month. That is a huge drop, and that is the difference of getting approved or declined. So let's take a look at what happened. So when we're looking at the 747, so this is the before, you'll notice that the credit cards here have low balances, or what Equifax and TransUnion would determine as low balances. So you have one credit card with just a $41 balance and a limit of 5,000. And then you have one that's, got a 4,000 or whatever and a $15,000 limit. The balance is not the important part. It's the balance versus the limit. So if you had a $500 balance, that could be either high or low in the eyes of Equifax and TransUnion, all depending on what your limit is. So if you had a $500 balance and a $500 limit, that is a high balance in the eyes of Equifax and TransUnion. You look desperate or dependent on your credit, and therefore your risk level jumps up and your score plummets. And then if you have a $500 balance on let's say a $5,000 card or a limit of 5,000, then all of a sudden that same balance is considered low. So when looking at maintaining and having good credit, the most important part is the balances on your credit cards. And so when we look at after, what had essentially happened is one credit card maxed out, the other one jumped up much higher or over that halfway mark, and that dramatically dropped the score. That is one of the number one effects to the score. I know when you look at the pie wheel that most people will have seen before or focus on, I don't like this pie graph because of the fact that it is very simplistic and doesn't go through half of the most important things that are just essential for people to know. But they put it at 30% as how much it's weighed on your credit score. I beg to differ. I would say it's just as important as your payment history, but that utilization is really your amounts owed or your utilization on the credit cards. If you have heard of that, then that's great. But where it catches a lot of people that generally have good credit, it catches them in problems, is that when people are buying real estate, they tend to go and buy a lot of crap along with it. And I say crap, it's probably important to some people, obviously not me, but picking out the blinds and the furniture and matching everything else, or even if you're having to do some renovations before doing a refinance, that might be more applicable to this group. You have to be very, very cautious of your credit card balances, because as soon as they're caught over the halfway mark, that's where the dramatic drops to your score. And that can take you from approved to decline very quickly if you don't monitor that. Ways around that, you could look at, loans are dangerous because it's a new account and that can hurt your credit as well as be beneficial. So it's something where that could be an issue. But if you have a line of credit, much better to max out your line of credit than max out a credit card. Credit cards affect the score the most out of everything. So that is something to be very, very cautious about. Was there any questions on that or so far?
Yeah, Richard, we had one question here, which is interesting. If a bank's current interest rate is around 6.2%, and if the person's credit score is great and will be around 800, will that lower the interest rate?
No.
No, yeah.
So the score is a good first impression. it doesn't control the whole application process, whether it's for a mortgage, a vehicle, or any other type of financing. So it's something where you want to have a good first impression. So if you think of it like applying for a job, you go in and you're well dressed, you're confident, you got a great smile, you firm handshake. That's all good and that's important. But if you have no job experience for the job that you're applying for, then that could be an issue. But also when it comes to other types of financing, like credit card, they don't care too much about your income because they don't verify it. But on mortgage financing, those are the other things that they're looking for, your job, your income, stuff like that. That can push you in different ways as well to get influence on there for the interest rate. But I mean, it helps, but it doesn't necessarily control everything. So hopefully that answers your question there. What I think is important when dealing with credit is when you know how it works, it's something that you don't have to be afraid of, like Danielle had mentioned. And one of the things that I just kind of came to me here is if you are looking for tenants that have some kind of public record on there, that can actually be one of the best tenants that you have. So because I deal with a lot of people with credit issues, whenever I rent out my property, the first thing I look at is their credit. And I actually would pick someone who's been through a bankruptcy or consumer proposal or some kind of debt program over someone with great credit. And the reason why I say that is because what people tend to lose focus on is so obsessed with the score that they don't realize what is essentially happening here. When you have someone that has an 800 score and a ton of debt, any fluctuation in the costs or their job or something like that, and most likely they won't be able to pay you. They have a bunch of debt. Whereas someone who has public record or even bad credit, depending on what that looks like, can be even more beneficial because now they have no debt. So depending on, obviously you want someone who will pay their bills on time, but when you understand how to read a credit report, how credit works, that's something where there can be a lot of potential there to get someone. So for me, when I looked at my tenant, she had been through a consumer proposal. She had made all her bill payments before. Everything else was strong. I took her in a heartbeat, and she's been in the place for, I think, 7 years now. Never missed anything, no problem. So credit does not have to be scary if you know how that works. And then I don't know if anyone does rent to own, but that's another kind of investment strategy that some people are into. And understanding how credit works can be beneficial to help, obviously, tenants get in and do that. So I'll kind of just cover just a resource here. I have a lot of online content for not necessarily just for investors, but just Canadians in general who want to understand how the credit system works and how to improve the score. There's lots of different videos on there. It's been around for a long time, so I'm covering a lot of the individual topics or questions that you might have. There's resources about, reviews on which type of credit card is the best. Now, this is typically for people trying to rebuild their credit, but if you have questions or issues just more specific that come up, then that's something where I can be a resource for you. I think I'm pretty much out of time here, but I'll just leave with my email. That's the best way if you do have questions that have to do with credit. I do understand the mortgage world. I don't want to do any mortgages anymore. That's all, Danielle. But I do understand it. I can help you get with the credit and understand not just how to have a high score, but get it good enough so that you can get approved for the best rates, best terms.
Awesome.
Okay, well, we don't see any more questions in the chat, but if anybody does have questions for Richard and they want to email him, that's his email right there. By all means, send him an email. He'd be more than happy to answer your questions. I don't think I see anything else in there.
Yeah,
Nope.
that's awesome. And Richard, just going over the basic stuff when people are getting a home loan there. I know Danielle always says that they shouldn't go out and do a number of things like big purchases while they're in the process of getting a home loan.
Yeah, it's one of those things where unfortunately it happens. People get excited. They want to buy a new car for the garage. They want to buy, you know, new stuff for everything. There's no sense having you know, a new car with no garage to park it in. So don't go on vacation. Don't buy stuff that isn't absolutely necessary. Talk to your broker. Your mortgage professional should be your deciding factor. You should talk to them about any major decision, because you don't want to be approved and then end up in the process being declined. That opens up to lawsuits and a whole bunch of headaches. So talk to your mortgage professional, keep them in the loop. They would much rather have too many questions than not getting a question before you've already screwed it up. So yeah, it's very important to just buy all that stuff afterwards, after you're approved. But yeah, definitely keep your credit as clean as possible.
But Richard, that's after you're approved and once you close on the property, right?
Yeah, sorry. Once you have the keys to the house.
Yeah. Because so the lenders will basically pull the credit. I'm sure all lenders don't do this, but it sounds like there's a strong possibility that lenders will pull the credit once again. So you get your pre-approval and then you go shopping for the property. And then sometimes, Tim, there's 90 days in between all of that till you move into the property. I mean, the quickest turnaround we've done is a couple of weeks, or even less. But still, on average, it would be 60 days, roughly 30 to 60 days on a closing. So in between that time, before the lender sends the money to close to the lawyer, the lender, it sounds like, is pulling credit once again before they do that.
Yeah, especially on the longer pre-approval timeframes, they will pull that. And because things can fluctuate so quickly, they all the lenders I'm aware of will pull it. So
yeah. Danielle's putting some notes in there, but at the same time, everyone has to understand, if you do have a deposit down on that property and you cannot close because now your credit has gone way down, unfortunately, you forego that deposit.
Yeah.
So everybody has to understand the risks involved during that time.
And open you up to lawsuit, can't you?
Yeah, and Danielle said in the chat here, technically lenders have the right to pull the credit up to and including the day of possession. And on new builds, they pull the credit approximately 30 days before possession again. So maintaining your credit, meaning don't go out there and buy a boat, an RV and all that between the offer to purchase and possession. Keep your credit clean in that period so hiccups don't arrive on possession day.
Yeah. And just in the credit world in general, Richard, can you speak to that? How, like, as Canada as a whole, you hear, you know, people are spending $1.50 for every dollar they make. Like, how is the credit game out there? Is it getting worse? Are we getting better at it? Where are we heading?
Well, we did really well in COVID, but now that we're not getting free money from the government to sit at home, and we can actually go on vacation and spend our money elsewhere. Unfortunately, we are now at the highest credit card debt that we've ever been at. And bankruptcies, insolvencies, they're up 20-30%, you know, between personal and consumer. And that's not going to change. And with the increase of costs, we're looking at a lot of people, like I think those percentages will be at 50% here soon enough in the next couple of years. People try and hold on as long as possible before going to an insolvency, but unfortunately, they once you're in over your head when it comes to credit card debt, or most types of debt, then all of a sudden it can get real bad real quick. And so
I'm just wondering if you could speak to divorces, because Tim and I have sold a lot of properties over the years for divorced couples, and it's always a difficult situation that we're put in, but that's part of our job. And I will never forget one divorce where the husband left and he just stopped paying everything, and he paid for everything, didn't he? Like, he paid the mortgage, he paid the utilities, he paid the cell phone bills, and so what happens I don't know if you've dealt with this, what happens in that situation? Because when bills aren't getting paid like that, Tim and I were wondering, so the story is, we got handed this property and we knew we had like 3 months to sell it before the banks were going to actually take over. So what happens in that situation?
So this is one of my problems with joint credit. So you can see the videos with Jess and I, who is my wife. We talk about divorce, which is always fun to talk online with your wife about divorce. But one of the things that is a huge pitfall or potential risk for you is having any kind of joint credit with a spouse. Now, other than mortgage financing, because typically you don't run away from a mortgage, unless you're belly up anyways. But most people will want to pay that because they want to get a piece of the equity from it. But from all other types of credit, vehicle financing, lines of credit, credit cards, anything that's joint or has your name attached to it, you have to be extremely careful about, because it's a huge risk. As soon as you put your name on it, you are 100% responsible for that debt and maintaining the minimum payments, regardless what your lawyer tells you. So the lawyer may say, don't pay it because they want to fight for it in court or whatever. That might be great for them and their paycheck, but it is terrible advice for your credit or any chance of you have to get best rates and best terms. So co-signing is the same thing. You may love your child, but you might want to kill them if they don't pay their card. So I tell my wife, I tell my kids, I love you, but I will never co-sign or put my name on anything. That's just not something I'm willing to do, because I see so many horror stories. It doesn't matter who bought the car, who bought the vacuum, who has the stuff. Banks and lenders don't care. Your name's on it. You're 100% responsible for that.
Wow. Okay, and then
Can I add one thing to that, Richard?
Yeah.
I love what you said, because your lawyer is not your mortgage broker, and we wouldn't give legal advice, and your lawyer won't give mortgage advice. So
they shouldn't.
Yeah. So checking in, just because, again, your lawyer says something or your accountant says something, you always need to check with your mortgage broker to see how is that going to affect your ability to keep investing and accumulating properties, right? And one thing, I'm sure you're asked this often too, but as that brought up the divorce situation, when you have like a joint line of credit, oftentimes I'll hear people say, oh, well, my ex-husband's going to make the payments on it, so we don't need to include that. But the bottom line is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but if your name's on it, you have to include it, or they have to somehow qualify to remove your name off of it entirely.
Yeah, which is very difficult. And so you do know it all there, Danielle. But as far as the actual process to get your name off of anything, it is very difficult. So typically the balance has to be down to 0 before you can get your name removed from anything. So even if you have a separation agreement or, whatever you have in writing, doesn't trump the original agreement that you have with the bank. And the bank will not let you go, most likely, until that balance is 0, or the other person can qualify it very easily. But even if they can qualify it, I still see banks that will hold on to it, because there's really no incentive for them to go through the headache of separating it. So it's very hard to get joint credit separated once you've added your name to something.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And that's affected us on the reverse, when people are going through a divorce, and then sometimes one of the parties will ask us to go shopping for a property, but then they don't realize that they need the separation agreement, or they need those balances cleared off,
Right.
to actually proceed. And we still have clients that we know wanted to buy over the years and still haven't.
Yeah, because they're still tied to that original mortgage, and that
Yeah.
takes their qualifying ability away.
It does, yeah, unfortunately.
Okay, one last quick thing for anybody that's wondering, if someone is going down that road of bankruptcy, what does that time frame look like? How does it look? And how much hell are you going to go through with that? So I heard it's the opposite, actually. We've got clients that have gone through it over the years because of different reasons,
Mhm.
and it actually gets easier.
Yeah.
To be honest, any of the debt programs out there, once you're at that point where you just can't pay, bankruptcy is one of the better ones to go through. I know that may sound weird and go against everything that you've been taught as a child or just kind of thought of. But what's really important about a debt program is understanding how it affects the credit report and how quickly you can get out of it. So a lot of the debt programs, they'll keep you in for 5 years, where in a bankruptcy, you can be in and out as soon as 9 months. So if you reestablish your credit properly, it's generally 2 years from completion. There are lenders that will look at best rate mortgage financing. If you're out for 2 years, you might get like an exception with a consumer proposal after 1 year. If everything else is really strong, there's a few lenders that will look at that. But typically the ideal amount of time is 2 years after you've completed the program. So when looking at any kind of debt program, feel free to reach out. I can kind of go through it in more detail. I got lots of videos, the pros and cons of each type of debt program. But really, it's how quickly can you get in and out and start rebuilding.
Okay.
Well, and I guess getting back to that question before about getting a lower interest rate if you had good credit, I guess that would work on buying vehicles, right? If you didn't have great credit, you would get, same sort of thing, a B lender on a vehicle or something like that.
Yeah, and it jumps a lot. So it's not uncommon to have 30% interest rate on a vehicle with bad credit. So it is, and the other thing in addition to that is the lenders, the car companies that generally do that, or the dealerships that specialize in that, generally offer very shady vehicles. So I get a lot of comments on the vehicle because the person's desperate. They just sell them whatever. And so unfortunately that can be an additional issue above and beyond the high interest rate is that you might be getting a lemon or more often problems with it because you were desperate. So
Wow, crazy.
Okay, so that probably wraps up Richard's presentation there. Thanks a lot, Richard. That was great. Like we said before, anybody has any questions, email Richard. If you really want to delve into this, grab one of his 2 books or grab them both. They're on Amazon, and Richard's sort of like the expert, the Canadian expert on credit. So if you need to know anything about your own credit, what to do with it, how it gets good, how it gets bad, grab one of his books. Yeah,
it's awesome. I mean, it's a tough topic, and I applaud everybody being on the webinar tonight because it's something that we should be all aware about, especially if you have kids or you're investing with other people or you have someone that's just getting by, exactly where to get advice now. And we're not afraid of tackling these tough subjects. I mean, other investment groups won't go anywhere near it. We want to teach everybody all aspects of investing in real estate, the good and bad. So thank you, Richard. That was awesome.
All right. So that wraps up our presentation for today. We're just going to go over a couple of things. The first thing we're going to go over is our book, 1 Million Reasons to Buy Real Estate.
Yeah, this is a free ebook. You can get it on our website, calgaryrealestatewealth.com. Just Google it, Calgary Real Estate Wealth. You'll find it on there. we really do give you 1 million reasons to buy real estate. It actually goes over how you can create $1 million of equity for yourself. And you know what? We show you how we've done it. So, and how our clients are doing. And it's really interesting. It goes through the core fundamentals of investing in real estate. And if you're thinking of getting into real estate investing, it's a free read. It's an easy read. You'll read it in one evening. And it's fun. We tell
Yeah,
some
and if
stories.
you're starting out, it's great information. If you're an experienced investor, it's a rehash some of the stuff that you might have gone over years ago, and it might get you excited to do another purchase. The next one we're going to go over is our book, our second book, Fearless Real Estate. We don't have a copy of it with us right now, but we wrote this during COVID, and it goes through tons of our clients' stories using every different real estate investment strategy out there, and it shows their successes. It doesn't talk about us. Well, we have a few stories about us, but most of the book is about our client success stories.
Yeah, and that's why we put all the clients on the front of it, or a lot of them. We didn't want it to be about us. We wanted to showcase how you can do it and how our clients here in Calgary are doing it. And you know what? A lot of these guys, I just seen a few of the boys say goodbye in the chat there. Some of these guys just simply took action, and now they've made over $200,000 on their rental properties within a short period of time. So if you're thinking real estate investing is going to take a long time, it's all about buying correctly and having a good team around you. And that's what we want to be, as part of your team. And guess what? It's free. It's free to use us as your realtor. So we can't guarantee it, but we make sure our clients make money every step of the way when they're investing in real estate, and they have the support going forward. Next thing is if you want to speed track it, by all means. We don't push this on anybody at all, but if you want to speed track your journey to wealth through real estate, we do have a program. The best thing about it, it's only $97 per month. We can definitely tell you that the stuff in this program, we've paid over $17,000 for this material, just through one course, and we've done multiple courses over the years. And so what we've done is we've hand selected material, we've put it into over 100 hours of content in our course. You get instant access, and guess what? We don't hold you to it. If you don't like it, you can quit anytime. That's totally up to you, but it definitely gives you the information on how to move forward, what strategy is best for you, if real estate investing is for you, and then it takes you in depth on each step of your journey, really.
Yeah, so it's got all that video content, but it also has physical content. It's got all the forms you'll need, all the leases. It goes through our whole landlord kit, everything you'll need to get tenants, to keep tenants, to raising rent. It's got all kinds of guides, investment guides. It's got all kinds of information that you will need no matter what strategy you're doing in real estate investing. It's all downloadable. It's all on there. So it's just basically everything you need to get started and to continue on your real estate investing career. And we've packaged it up nice and neatly, and it's Canada focused. So, you know, you'll be able to use every single part of it.
Yeah, and once again, that's for the serious investors that want to own one or more properties and do it the right way. If you did like what you see, we hope you go to work tomorrow and tell your friends all about us. We will be hosting an in-person and live meeting at the same time in 2 weeks. It'll be our first time doing it, doing both at once.
Yeah, you don't have to show up here. It'll still be on Zoom.
Yeah. And we're hoping to see some of you that we haven't seen for a long time. We normally get roughly 75 to 100 people down here. When we were doing it, we're looking forward to getting back to it. Once again, we hope you liked it, and we hope to see you in 2 weeks online or in person.
And thanks for joining us.